did not expect such a mature, meditative look at the human condition, how we process an existential crisis, finding one's self-worth, and being able to move on from our past mistakes and trauma. Because that is exactly what Fionna and Cake is, chat. It's not just gender-bent versions of Finn and Jake. Maybe that's what it was initially. It's like, hey, let's take this concept and let's completely turn on its head and have this show be the true successor to something like Adventure Time.
Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class in the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. Enjoy the video.
We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show, and that is my long-awaited review for Fionna and Cake Season 1. I don't know if this is going to be a multi-season show, especially how this series kind of wraps up. But for right now, I'm just going to call it Fionna and Cake Season 1 review. And I've already done several episodes of the series so far, but after, watching the 4 episodes, which I really enjoyed, thought were fantastic, I wanted to kind of, it's like, let me go ahead and watch the rest of these. I want to see the full extent of this story. I want to speak on this show with more context. But already, I was loving the show. I thought it was very impressive. A wonderful spin-off sequel series to Adventure Time. But for those that need a synopsis, a little history, a little bit of a background chat, the series focuses on Fionna and Cake from the Adventure Time series, who were originally gender-bent fan fiction characters seemingly created by the Ice King. Though here, they are very much real and reside in their own dimension, and they, along with the former Ice King, Simon Pentecoff, go on a multiverse hopping adventure of self-discovery and enlightenment. And, before jumping into the review of the series itself, I do want to briefly talk about, my overall thoughts on Adventure Time, chat, which, I feel like Adventure Time is one of, if not the most influential animated show from the 2010s. Not to say that we didn't get some amazing animated shows throughout the 2010s. Of course, we actually did a Discord discourse recently talking about some of the terrific animated programs throughout that decade. But it's very obvious that Adventure Time had a major impact, and the fact that it has continued on, past its, 10 seasons. I mean, it's a 10-season animated show. They've done other spin-offs, other specials, other kind of made-for-streaming TV movies, all of which were also very successful. And now here we are, with Fionna and Cake. But, I remember watching that show. I remember the advertising, because clearly Cartoon Network, there's no doubt. Of course, Adventure Time initially created by Pendleton Ward, who I think left the series halfway through due to a variety of reasons. But it's still with the show, providing voices, providing as a consultant, something like that. Like, he's still on it, obviously, but he wasn't like, he's not the showrunner. Other people have since taken his place, and I think have done great things with the series, obviously. But I remember, back in the day, I remember being in the movie theater back in 2010 or maybe in late 2009 when they were advertising this show, with live-action commercials, but also, cut in between all that with the actual clips from the series. And I thought, oh, this looks like, fun, goofy stuff. The live-action stuff kind of, didn't appeal to me. I was like, yeah, it's kind of annoying. But, I did watch the animated show. I think the first episode is, classic, take on a zombie movie. And I thought, oh, this is pretty fun. And, I like the characters. You had, Finn the human and Jake the dog. Finn is seemingly the last human in this mystical, magical, fantastical world full of monsters and wizards and princesses. It's that kind of, a lot of those, tropes that we often see in, genre content. And, of course, he has a magic dog, voiced by Jean DiMaggio, who voiced Bender in Futurama. He's done the voice of the Joker. He's been in countless things. And, he's a magic dog that is able to transform his body into all sorts of shapes and things. And him and his brother Finn go off on all these adventures, and they help characters like Princess Bubblegum and Marceline the Vampire Queen. They battle the Ice King, who wants to get all the princesses, and it kind of started off like, oh, this is just kind of fun, irreverent. But as it got, into the deeper into the seasons, chat, as we got more seasons, they started to just add more context to the world, and they started to get darker and deeper with its themes, its emotions, and its history with the characters, where this seemingly fantastical, magical world filled with, fun and but also darkness and monsters is actually a post-apocalyptic Earth in which humanity was wiped out in a nuclear holocaust called the Great Mushroom War. It's referred to as the Great Mushroom War in the series. And then thousands of years later, magic and mystery has gone back into the world, and now new people occupy it. And again, the primary characters we follow are Finn and Jake. But then even after that, even with that context, like, whoa. Which is even funny, because even like John DiMaggio was like, yeah, this show's funny. I didn't even know what that was taking place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. I was like, whoa. And he's like, now it makes a lot more sense, because even like in the earlier seasons, you see like these dilapidated buildings, you see remnants of the old world, and they don't go, they don't shove in your face. That's what I appreciate about this show, is that, they're not holding the hand of their audience, going like, like in your face all the time. It's very subtle. And then they start to get into it more, but it's always through the characters, like in latter seasons. And even he was like surprised by that. He was like, oh, wow. And it made him even more invested in the series. Everybody, I feel like. And we got to know more about Finn's history and his parents, his real parents, and how dark and messed up like that is. And as they went into the future more and more, as the characters aged, and they had to deal with a variety of problems, like emotional issues, physical issues. I mean, they have multiple episodes in which Finn has to deal with losing his arm. It's like they really went out of their way to tell some mature stories in this kind of wacky, weird world. And there was plenty of humor. Don't worry, of course, there's plenty of humor, but they never did like a half measure when it came to the characters or the emotions or just the reveals of like, a goofy villain like the Ice King. He just wants to kidnap princesses. And then you realize like how he actually became Ice King and other characters that he was helping along the way, and how he just completely, destroyed his life, and he made all these sacrifices in order to like raise his would-be daughter, Marceline. It's pretty amazing what they did with that show. And it ended, and they did spin-offs, that followed certain characters and their relationships, in the future. And they always had the Fionna and Cake episodes. Like Fionna and Cake, that wasn't just like an original thing created like, hey, let's just do gender bent versions now. Like they had episodes that were like fan fiction episodes where they were the creation of the Ice King, right? It was his gender bend fan fiction of Finn and Jake. And we got like several, I mean, maybe a dozen or maybe just under a dozen episodes focusing on these characters, not just Fionna and Cake, but also like Prince Bubblegum and Marshall Lee, the Vampire King, voiced by Donald Glover, who's still with this series, which is crazy to me, especially how busy he is, chat, working on so much stuff, music and films and TV shows, animated shows. So that's nice to see. But that's all we really thought. It's like, oh, it's just going to be that, and it's fun, and the voice actors do a great job. That's, it's like, oh, it's just kind of like, hey, a nice little what if episode. Let's get back to the main plot. And that's the thing. Like, even before I started watching this series, this spinoff series, I expected to see a very entertaining spinoff of Adventure Time. I figured it would have some great comedic and even emotional moments like the original show, but I did not expect such a mature, meditative look at the human condition, how we process an existential crisis, finding one's self-worth, and being able to move on from our past mistakes and trauma. Because that is exactly what Fionna and Cake is, chat. It's not just gender-bent versions of Finn and Jake. Maybe that's what it was initially. It's like, hey, let's take this concept and let's completely turn on its head and have this show be the true successor to something like Adventure Time. Because that's the thing I like about this, is and Adventure Time overall. Because over its 10 years, they just didn't do the same thing over and over and over again. Like, the series grew up along with the fan base. It grew with the viewers. And now, like, a lot of those viewers are people who are in their either late teens or early 20s, or hell, into their late 20s or early 30s. And that is reflected through these characters. Again, we focus, in this case, Fionna and Cake we have Fionna Campbell and her cat Cake, who's very much, just a regular cat. And she lives in this world that is very mundane, very much like our own. You know, she is a disaffected 20-something, probably late 20s, and she's just going from one dead-end job to the other, from one dead-end job to the other, and is thoroughly dissatisfied with it, going through an existential crisis, having to deal with her own selfishness that has held her back, and is just struggling with day-to-day life, which I'm like, I think we could all identify with that. All of us, 20-somethings and early 30-somethings, still dealing with these things, entering a world where it's incredibly difficult to get a proper, foothold in anything. And they do bring back, the original voice actors for Fionna and Cake, which I thought was very smart. We have Madeline Martin, who's voicing Fionna. And later on, Roz Ryan reprises her voice as Cake. She does not reprise her voice for the first several episodes because she is very much just a cake, a cat, just a derpy cat. But I liked how this series started off by just making it very relatable. Basically saying like, hey, this is probably like how a lot of our audience feels. They're growing up in a time where it's not as easy to pay rent. It's not as easy to get various insurances, dental insurance, health insurance. Not easy to own a home. And you're going from one job to the other, and it's a struggle. And so I really like that start. So even if you didn't watch Adventure Time, it's very much kind of like, hey, here's a cold opening. We're not even like mentioning all the stuff that happened in Ooo with Finn and Jake and Simon. It's like, let's focus on these characters first. Let's provide people a look into what their life is. And it's funny. Like, that's the thing too. Like, it also introduces you to the fact that, okay, this is going to be a more mature, a darker show. The characters swear. All right, there's a lot of sexual innuendo in this series. Like one of the first moments, I was like, whoa! I was taken aback by this. Where Fionna, she is a tour guide on a bus on this bus tour for her city, and she does not like her job whatsoever. And basically, she ends up getting fired, and the owner's like, if you want your deposit back, then you gotta bring back your uniform. You want your uniform? Well, here's the uniform. And she just fucking takes her pants off, pulls her pants down, and you just see her panties. She's like, I didn't want this. She's like, whoa, Jesus, what are you doing? I was like, whoa, Jesus, what are you doing? And that's what it is. And I thought that was like really funny. And her delivery, by the way, I mean, all the voice acting across the board for this show is so great. But even that first episode where Madeline Martin, where she's just had the worst day imaginable, trying to take care of her sick cat while also getting fired from her job. And she's like encounters this one character who's like this alternate version of Huntress Wizard from the original series. And she's like trying to find this person. She thinks it's her. And she's like, I'm not that person. And Fiona just stares and goes, God damn it. Just continues walking. Like stuff like that, I think is like really, really funny. I was digging. And then the next episode, that's the thing though. That's the thing. Like this series is called Fionna and Cake, but I would honestly call it Fionna, Cake, and Simon. Because this is not only the journey and the adventure of Fionna and Cake, but it's also the journey of Simon Pentecoff, who was formerly the Ice King. And again, for context, he was an archaeologist, a professor of, mystical ancient artifacts. And he fell in love at a young age with this character named Betty Groff, who is a recurring character throughout the show. And they find this crown, and this crown basically makes him go insane and gives him ice powers. And for whatever, something happened between him and Betty. We initially we don't know what happened, right? And the apocalypse comes, and he eventually, survives through the power of the crown, through his powers, and is able to live through nuclear Armageddon and all the creatures and atrocities that follow after that. And he meets this little girl named Marceline, who's also like half vampire, and he basically raises her as his own daughter for many years. But then eventually he goes insane due to the effects of the crown that prolongs his life. And gives him these powers, and he becomes like a recurring antagonist in the earlier season of Adventure Time. But as we learn more, it's like, oh, he's just this guy that just tried to protect these people and made mistakes along the way. And so here we are now, many years later, where after the original show, he's an older man, and he is struggling with survivor's guilt. He's struggling with the death of Betty, who did come back into his life, but was quickly taken away. He has depression, and he even is considering like self-harm. and later on in the series. I was like, oh my God, like the stuff that they do with him is so fascinating. And like he's just this character that is so put upon, that is so miserable, and he just wants to reconnect with his girlfriend. He just wants to be there and to experience a relationship, because he just does not feels like he fits in with Ooo anymore, in the various denizens of this world, even the humans that they later do discover from the original series. He's depressed, and he wants to move on, and he wants to go back to Betty, and that eventually, through this magical spell, it actually forces Fionna and Cake to come out of his mind, because that is where their dimension resides is within his mind. And they initially go on this journey together, trying to find these things that they feel like it would make them happy. And that's the thing. Like, I think they initially start their journey together for like the wrong reasons, right? Where Fionna and Cake, they want to go to Ooo, because eventually, they get the magic they've always wanted, through a lot of timey-wimey mumbo-jumbo, sure. But, they want to go to Ooo and live a life of adventure, and Simon wants to, his thing is like, well, the only way to preserve your world, bring magic back to your world, is if I'll make the sacrifice to be Ice King again. And just, I won't exist anymore, and he'll exist instead. And in his mind, it'll make up for the loss of Betty, who sacrificed herself to save me anyway. Because he just wants to live. He doesn't want to live anymore. And they travel, the majority of the series, they travel across the multiverse and come across, familiar faces. We see Prismo, who is this wish god, who we actually learn is the true creator of Fionna and Cake, and that's not what he can't do that. Like that's against all the rules and regulations of being a god, is creating your own world. That's only for one specific god, as they mention. And then this causes a series of events in which this god auditor, the Scarab, gets involved and serves as the primary antagonist throughout the show, who basically literally audits these gods, captures them, and punishes them. And he's like, well, you created this universe, this is illegal, so I gotta delete this fan fiction universe because it's not good enough, it's not real. And then he goes throughout all these different dimensions after, capturing Prismo pretty much, trying to murder Fionna and Cake and do whatever he's gonna do to Simon, who wants to die anyway. And we do, now listen, this just show is not, it's not fans, I wouldn't say it's fan service. Like, we do go to different worlds that were from the original show. But the way in which they use them and they tell those stories, I think is great. And they almost act as like ending chapters or bookends to those kind of plot lines they set up in the show. It's like, hey, let's go back to there, see what happened to these characters, and maybe give them a sort of ending. Like, we go to the world of, Farm World Finn, who was like an alternate version of, Finn and Jake, was more realistic world there. He ends up getting, through various circumstances, ends up getting the crown, creates a post-apocalyptic environment in which, he murders a lot of people via his ice powers. But then it's like many years later, he doesn't have the crown anymore. He has a family. His wife is fucking dead. It's like Jesus. And like, it's almost like a Mad Max future in Adventure Time. It's like, what if Ooo was very Mad Max and still very post-apocalyptic? Just everyone wears leather chaps and eats people. Like that's what we're dealing with. And we go to another dimension, which is this idyllic dimension which, the Ice King figured out how to harness the power of the crown and not be crazy. And he's like the Winter King. And it's this idyllic, beautiful winter wonderland world where it's all filled with magic and songs and things, It's like a Rankin Bass special. That literally, even some of like the animation is reminiscent of some of like the 2D like Rankin Bass stuff. And I think that was done on purpose. And I absolutely love that. And we see like an alternate version of Bubblegum, who is the crazy person of that world. And we have the Candy Queen. And like during that entire episode, they have some great musical numbers that are like really funny, but also like very disturbing. And in that episode, it also shows you, it's like, hey, you may think that you wanted this idyllic world, but then here's the truth of it. Here's what's actually going on. You realize, oh, maybe that thing I want isn't what I needed. That's what's so great about this show is it presents our characters. It basically says our characters, like, we want this, but we realize, and they realize on their journey, it's not what they need in that moment to live a better life and a healthy lifestyle. And they start to realize that initially, especially when it comes to Fionna and Cake, in that first episode. And then we see like a horror universe where what if Marceline never had Simon as a father figure? What if he didn't exist to be her dad? And she is like one of the followers of the Vampire King, and this is very much a 30 Days of Night universe where all the vampires have decimated humanity and all the magical creatures. And again, it's very post-apocalyptic, and Marceline's evil. She does horrific things. And Simon, that's like Simon realizes, he sees this, is like, I wasn't there for her, and this is what she is now. And then he's realizing like he does have self-worth because of what he did and helped her on her journey, because if he wasn't there, this is what she would have become. And it's like, oh wow, I really, really love that in that episode. And we also see like other versions of characters. We see Martin Mertens, who's Finn's dad, voiced by Stephen Root. I absolutely love Stephen Root. He's my favorite character actor working this day. And Stephen Root, like, there was always a mystery surrounding like Finn's parents, like what happened to them, who they are. We learned that, Finn's dad was a horrible human being. He was terrible. And in this one, they kind of present him as this very altruistic person. Again, it's always showing you like, hey, what could be? What could have happened? And, it's what they do with his character is very good and also tragic and horrifying as well. And even past that, like, we eventually get to like literally meet the god of chaos and creation, which is called Golb. And this is just a great arc for Simon, where he's able to go over all the events of his life, basically, and in connection with Betty. And we get some of the most heartfelt moments of this series with Simon, and what he is dealing with, and why he wants to self-harm himself, and what he's struggling with all the time. And we see like what led up to his, romantic relationship with Betty, and all that I think is handled extraordinarily well. It's great. Tom Kenny, who goes to people probably best know him for, doing the voice of SpongeBob. Also, Mudflaps and Skids from Transformers, the Negrobots as they were called. He does a great job here playing Simon Pentecoff, and I think it's some of his best voice work in his entire career. I was incredibly impressed with what he did and what he brought to this character. But again, for the comedic stuff, which is always there, it's always part of the show, but even for the very heavy, dramatic, dark material, it's beautiful. I don't want to get into too much details. I want you guys to obviously watch this, but how they handle all the big emotional beats and the character arcs and the changes that they go through, and realizing it's not what they want, but it's what they need. Amazingly well done. Very well done. And again, I briefly talked about the animation, but the animation, Chad, we get multiple different styles throughout this series. It's very much an evolved, you could tell the animation's got more money now. Not to say like eventually I never looked cheap, but you could tell that they we have a lot more resources than we once did, and we're able to play around with it more. And just every time they go to like a different world, it has like a different like almost aesthetic to a degree. And the color palettes are amazing, Chad. Like the entire color spectrum is on full display in this. And we go to these beautiful worlds, winter wonderlands filled with all sorts of blues and pinks and soft colors. And then we'll go to like another dimension, which is, very realistic, similar to ours. But then we'll go to another one, which is just kind of horrific and terrifying, devoid of life, and where the primary color is just kind of like a yellow, like brownish white, and all that is beautiful. Every episode they make sure like, hey, let's change the palette up, let's change the aesthetics up, so it keeps you invested. Like, ooh, what's this world going to be, right? And also all the action scenes, like there's a lot of action in this show, and it's all incredibly well animated and well choreographed. I didn't know there was any animation errors. Maybe there's something, but nothing that stood out to me. You get some amazing action sequences, and again, it shows you what you can do with 2D animation, and it's still absolutely gorgeous as well. And I think, here's the other thing. I think the story also has an amazing finale that can act as an ending for Fionna and Cake and Simon. But I think just due to the enormous success of the series, I would not be surprised if they continue on with more seasons. But like how this thing wraps up, it's like, okay, this could be goodbye. This could definitely be goodbye. But again, just how popular this obviously is and how critically acclaimed it is, I would not be surprised that you do more. And again, this is one of Cartoon Network, one of Warner Brothers' most successful animated shows in the 2010s, continuing on in here. And People love Fionna and Cake, so I would not be surprised that they continue on with subsequent seasons. Also, I want to really talk about just the character of Fionna. It just made me realize, because she is, in my mind, like right now, when I think one of the best written female characters in 2023 in terms of like a long form show. And the reason why I just started thinking about that, because I've been watching Ahsoka a lot lately, as you guys know. I've been doing reviews for Ahsoka on a consistent weekly basis. And one of my criticisms is how stoic a number of the characters are, particularly with the female characters. And it's been weird, especially because there are animated, those original live action characters were animated characters in regards to Ahsoka and Sabine and Hera. And I was just like, why are they just so distinctly different from their animated counterparts? Like, that's the thing that's been like really weird to me. And like, they made the choice to make them just be all very stoic and to be very serious all the time. And, it's almost like if the writers are like, well, in order to, and I don't like this term. I've grown not to like this, like the idea of a strong female character. It's like, I like well-written characters. I like well-written female characters, right? I think anyone else does. But it's like their idea of in their minds, what a strong character, a female character, what a well-written female character is. It's like, it's someone who's just stoic and always serious and does not display like emotion, like at all. And I just disagree with that completely. I think that has undercut a show like Ahsoka and has undercut those characters. But I look at something like Fionna and Cake, where the reason why I like her so much is because she's flawed. And it doesn't matter, just like any other male character would be flawed. Just like Finn is flawed. She's incredibly flawed in this. And that's what makes her interesting to watch. She goes through a spectrum of emotion. She grows as a character. She starts out as someone who's disaffected, who's depressed, who is selfish, and doesn't realize what she's doing may be hurting others. But then she has that realization. Like halfway through the show, she has that realization and she's dealing with that. And it's not like, oh, we're going to deal with that one episode. It's like, no, it's still extended. And, she's like, all I'll say is like, she ends up hurting some people. And she sees the ramifications of that and it really affects her. And it makes her realize, like, it's not about what I want, it's about what I need right now. Again, I always go back to that because that's what the series, I think, truly is about. And, at one point, her and Cake argue. Cake, says something like really nasty to her, really mean, and she breaks down and cries. And it's like ugly cry. It's not a like, oh, how could you say that? It's a, it's an ugly fucking cry. Oh God. It's like snot bubbles and just tears coming out. I was like, oh shit. But I like that moment. It's like, and what it is in the show, it's everything that she's been dealing with based, in her real life up to this point, which has been incredibly crazy and stressful. And it's this release. And I was like, yes, this is what I want. For any character, I don't care what gender, what sex you are. It's like, I want to see a spectrum of emotion for you. Not just, hey, how you doing? I don't want to see someone just cross their goddamn arms for, 7.5 episodes and not display any goddamn emotion, all right? And I like that they did that with her a lot. And then she gets better as a person. And she's much like Simon. She realizes that I've made mistakes and I got to fix them. And, and it changes her whole philosophy of how she viewed the world, people around her, and also herself. And I was like, this is so good. Like, this is a great example of focusing on your lead character who is also a woman. It's like, look what they did here, It's the reason why someone like, and when we think of like a lot of well-written female characters, certainly in action things, like why we like Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley, why we like, Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. They're not just tough, stoic women. They show a huge swath of emotion, right? Especially like when you look at someone like Sigourney Weaver's Ellen Ripley, where, we see this maternal instinct come out in the sequel, even before then. It's like she's like, I'm not the person in charge of this operation, but she has to take charge because everything else is falling apart. And they kind of they follow the same sense of structure. They follow those types of tropes in this show, and that's why I think it stands out so well, and why Fionna is one of the best written female characters this year that I could really think of. and just elevates the show even more in my mind personally. For anyone that had, I think, like any misgivings about this series being just a gender-bent fan service spinoff, know that is actually an incredibly well-animated, thought-provoking series about characters trying to find value in their lives and being able to forgive themselves in order to move on in an emotionally healthy way. It serves as a great sequel to Adventure Time in terms of its mature tone, drama, and sense of fun, but also showcases the talent of its many creators to push the series in new directions that keep it wonderfully fresh and emotionally engaging. I mean, I can keep singing the praises of this show the entire time, Chad. There's so many other things that they touch on. They touch on Finn and what he's dealing with and how he's not doing well when it comes to the process of grief in regards to Jake. I mean, there's so much in here that I can get into details about, but just know that this is a very well-written show. One of the best animated shows of the year so far. And again, I'm very curious they're going to continue this on. If they don't, they choose not to. It's like, I get it. Because they wrap it up in such a way it's like, you told a very tight-knit, very well-structured story that had so much fun, that is playing around, but at the same time, playing around with so many emotional, mature themes. I mean, it is an incredible success. In terms of an animated sequel series or a spinoff, I mean, it's the best. I don't know. I have to really think about that. It's like, it's up there with, stuff from the DCAU or spinning off from, like, Batman animated series. Like, you did such a great job. And I really loved it. Highly recommend it, especially if you're an Adventure Time fan. Even if you're not an Adventure Time fan, I still would encourage you to check this out. Just look what they did. Like they kind of. I mean, again, they don't hold your hand, but they do bring up some stuff from the past. So it's like, with a little context, you understand what the characters are going through. But if you just want to see some beautiful animation, some great voice acting. Great voice guest stars too. They could, Donald Glover is back here again as Marshall Lee. And they what they do with him and Prince Gumball, or the Gumball of that world, is handled extraordinarily well. It's well done. It's so well done, chat. So I really encourage you to check this show out. What about you guys? What did you think of Fionna and Cake? Have you seen Fionna and Cake? Based on what I'm saying, would you be interested in checking it out? Let me know.
5 minutes later.
Cake's great. Cake, she's Cake. That's the thing about like Cake. She's not a little piece of shit. The thing that's so funny about Cake is that again, she's not just a, I guess, species bent version of Jake the dog. Like, she's very different from him. She's also kind of shitty. She's, she does some questionable. She's very much a cat. That's all I'll say. She's very much a cat. I also like that she struggles with her powers throughout the show, because she's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And she gets better at it as the series goes along. But I love that she struggles, and, she's much like Fionna. She's not perfect. She has a variety of issues, and they do some great gags. Again, the two voice actresses that play both Fionna and Cake are absolutely excellent in this show. Madeline Martin and Roz Ryan nail it. So good. And they're back and forth. Their chemistry is incredible. They're just so, again, they'll just throw in a line or something that's really amusing, that'll like take you off guard. I love how in the show too, that, Cake is always trying to set up Fionna with like either a hot guy or a hot girl, like always. And it's like, you should kiss him. You should kiss her. Do it. Make babies. And it's like she's always like doing that to her. And even, listen, I'll tell you this. These animators are horny, chat, because they make Fionna thick in this show. They know what they're doing, and they even point out her thickness. Cake even points out, it's like, damn, girl, you look good in those shorts and everything. It's like, yeah. I know what you're doing here. I know you're doing that for all the artists on DeviantArt. And I am sure there is plenty of thick, big booty butt Fionna pics out there. No question about it. But they just like, yeah, we know what you guys are going to do, so here you go. Here it is. Here she is.
I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.